Hello everyone. This is the 9th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 33, Ministry Ball, Fudge, and Greengrass. The Christmas break was here, and like most of the students, Quinn was back at home. He only had a day to rest before his grandfather gave him some news. He was having dinner with George when the older of the two spoke. Tomorrow, there is a Yuletide ball at the ministry, and you will be attending the ball with me. Quinn didn't respond immediately and took a moment to think about this piece of information. He hadn't been to a formal public gathering like this, and if he attended this one, it would be his first one. Is my attendance necessary? Probed Quinn, as he would prefer not to go to these kinds of events. George glanced at his grandson and replied, "Yes, you are coming with me tomorrow. You are not allowed to skip this one." Quinn nodded and asked, "Is it because I have not been to these kinds of events?" "Yes, you have shown no interest in these types of gathering, so I have not forced you to come with me, but now is high time for people to know that I have another grandchild. Few know that I have another grandchild. It will be beneficial for you to familiarize yourself with people at that ball and at the same time for others to know that there is another person in the West family." Quinn silently nodded and thought, "Oh boy, here comes my public debut." Quinn thought that he would be busy at the ball, but he was mistaken. Ms. Rosie had him occupied from the moment he woke up. She took him to have a haircut in the morning, and then Quinn spent hours in a clothing store getting fitted for formal robes, and because they were needed later during the evening, and was forced to try on different colors, styles, and fits. Ms. Rosie even had him dance practice before the ball just to check if he remembered everything. He wanted to argue who he was going to dance with, but didn't after seeing the look on Ms. Rosie's face. And, just when Quinn was about to sit down for a relaxing read, George pulled in him to quiz him about the significant people coming at the ball. By the time Quinn was free, it was time to get ready for the ball. He put on his newly stitched bespoke robes and waited for his grandfather in the living hall. When George entered the hall, Quinn asked while sitting on a sofa, "How are we going to the location? Flu, apparition, or port key?" George replied with a smile on his face, "We are taking a carriage. It is already ready at the front door." He gestured with his chin, "Come on." Quinn got up from his seat and said, "Oh, is it a flying one, because I haven't gotten on one for a while." Quinn had been on Thestral-pulled carriages at Hogwarts, but they didn't fly for safety reasons. Students could be rather stupid and reckless. "Yes, it is a flying carriage. I ordered it for a change," said George as Quinn fell into step with him as they walked to the front door, where Elliot waited to bid them farewell. Elliot smiled towards Quinn and said, "Young master, don't be pressured. You just have to be your usual charming self, and everything would be all right." He then frowned and whispered, "Don't tell Ms. Rosie about any of this, she will not agree with me at all, and then I would have to sit as she reprimands me." Quinn chuckled and nodded in reply. Elliot opened the door, and the grandfather-grandson stepped out as Elliot followed them. In front of the manor stood a carriage with winged horses attached to it. Quinn moved close to the winged horses and noted, judging by the chestnut color, they are of the Ethenan breed. The winged horse was a magical species of horse, distinct for possessing wings that enabled them to fly. Winged horses were found worldwide, with many different breeds existing, including the Abraxan, Ethenan, Granian, and Thestral. Law required owners of winged horses to cast disillusionment charms on them regularly. Ethenan breed of winged horses was popular in Great Britain and Ireland as they were bred in the country, and even had winged horse racing leagues similar to the equestrian sport of horse racing. Quinn looked at the driver who opened the door for them and thought, "This guy must be pretty good at disillusionment charms, maybe I should ask for some tips." Inside of the carriage was much bigger and quite luxuriously furnished. Quinn sat opposite George, and the driver opened up a window from the front and pointed his wand towards the half-glass globe, and a white fire appeared inside the glass globe. Quinn looked at the white fire and thought about the candle chandelier in his A.I.D. office and all other rooms he frequented. All the sources of light are flames, maybe I should design a light artifact that uses lighting charms. Now, what would go into creating something like that? Elliot peered inside the carriage and wished, "I wish you a safe journey, and I hope you will enjoy the ball." Quinn smiled and said, "Thank you, Uncle Elliot." Elliot stepped back and nodded towards the driver, and Quinn heard the crack of a whip. Quinn looked outside the window to see the carriage moving, and after a dozen seconds, the carriage took off the ground into the air. Little by little, the land became distant with other trees and fields around the West Manor. After taking in the view for a few minutes, Quinn asked, "Is the ball at the ministry?" In response, George shook his head. "No, they have booked another building for the ball. It is the same building as every year, and to think they would learn to switch things up once in a while." Usually, Leah would accompany George on these kinds of events, but this year, she was busy with another country's Yuletide ball, maintaining the business relationship in different countries. Scene break. The carriage landed in front of a common-looking building. The driver drove the horse-pulled carriage into an underground floor of the building, functioning as a parking station. When Quinn and George exited the carriage, a ministry employee was waiting there to receive them. The ministry employee was a young man who stepped forward and greeted George. "Good evening, Mr. West. I am Malcolm MacDonald from the Department of International Magical Cooperation. I will be guiding you to the ball this evening." George nodded and silently followed Malcolm MacDonald, the ministry employee. Quinn walked with his grandfather. He also noticed that Malcolm MacDonald was sneaking peeks towards him. "Well, it is my first time here. I guess Malcolm MacDonald didn't know about me," thought Quinn, and also made eye contact with Malcolm once, and because of habit, Quinn extended his magic towards Malcolm's mind and felt no shields around his mind, but held back from reading his mind. After walking for a couple of minutes, they reached the hall. Quinn took in the hall room with its silverish and golden decor, shining every corner of the large room, velvet curtains framing the sides of the hall, and tens of circular tables set up in the hall with a large empty area in the middle for dancing. In the hall, multiple people dressed in robes and dresses mingling together, talking and laughing with each other. Malcolm MacDonald turned to face George and said, "I hope you enjoy the evening, Mr. West," and gave Quinn a light nod before leaving the pair. Quinn followed him with his eyes and saw that he was making a beeline towards a crowd of people, most probably alerting the minister that George West had arrived. Quinn looked up at George, asking with his eyes about what he should do. George smiled and replied, "You have to follow me for a while, and after introducing yourself to some significant people, you can relax and do whatever you want for the rest of the evening." Quinn smiled and nodded. "All right, let's go and meet some people." He chuckled and added, "How should I play this? Maybe a shy kid or maybe a charmer. Should I go the spoiled route?" George hugged him by the shoulder and warned with a small smile, "Don't cause mischief, and just be yourself." Quinn grinned and looked around. "Who should we talk to first?" George shook his head and stated, "We don't need to approach. Just wait, and people will come to us. Let's just grab a spot and let the others come to us." Quinn nodded, impressed by his grandfather's demeanor. George truly believed that people would flock around him. He does have the qualifications to back up his confidence, thought Quinn as he followed George and looked at the back of his grandfather with admiration. If it was social skills and values as a person, Quinn would be fine if he became half as good as George. George had just picked up a drink for himself, and his previous statement came true as the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Oswald Fudge, walked towards them with a big smile on his face. Behind a small group followed. Quinn noticed a woman who looked like a toad, but decided to ignore as long as she didn't talk to him. "Mr. West, you made it. I wasn't sure you would be showing up." "I am immensely delighted to see that you are here," the minister said in his most flattering voice. It made Quinn smile a little when he heard Fudge addressing his grandfather with Mr. Quinn clearly recalled that Fudge didn't do that with Albus Dumbledore or even Lucius Malfoy. It just showed how much influence George West held in Britain. "I had no plans this time of the year, so I decided to accept your invitation, Cornelius," said George with a stoic expression. He swept his eyes to the people behind Fudge, and that made them stand straighter. Even the toad woman didn't say a single word. George put a hand on Quinn's shoulder and introduced, "Let me introduce you to my grandson Quinn." All the people at once noticed that there was a kid beside George West. They didn't notice the kid before, and the common thought struck all, George West's grandson? Quinn smiled and put out his hand for a handshake. "Happy Yuletide, Minister." Cornelius Fudge grabbed Quinn's hand while feeling stunned. George West had a grandson? Why didn't I know about this? He also had the urge to grill Malcolm MacDonald about why didn't he feel the need to tell about George West's grandson. "Oh ho, Quinn West, is it? How old are you, Quinn?" smiled Fudge. Quinn let go of Fudge's hand and replied, "I am 12 years old." 12? Then, Fudge thought as he asked, "Where are you going to school, Quinn?" He knew that Leah West had studied at Beauxbaton, so he wanted to know where this grandchild studied. I study at Hogwarts and am in my second year, Quinn offered politely. Oh. This one goes to Hogwarts, excellent, thought Fudge as he thought about West family money staying in Britain. I see, how are you liking it? It has been learning about magic. The castle is also quite fascinating, replied Quinn. George decided to brag about Quinn. Quinn is at the top of his class. He scored above 100% in Transmigration, Charms, Herbology, Defense against Dark Arts, and Astronomy. Fudge clapped and smiled. Excellent. Excellent. It is important to be a good student. With that, Quinn spent some time standing by his grandfather while George chatted with the minister. After that, George allowed Quinn to leave his side and do whatever he wanted. Just come see me once in a while so that I know you are still in the hall, warned George before letting him go. Quinn had met the minister, so it wouldn't be long before he would be known throughout the ball and later to more people. Quinn nodded and decided to see if there was something for him to drink here. He walked to the bar and got a glass of a pineapple orange punch to drink. Quinn walked across the hall and looked at people to see if he recognized someone, and as he was sipping from his glass, he heard a startled voice, "You?" Quinn turned back with the glass still at his lips, and saw a familiar blonde dressed in a lavender dress standing in front of him as she stared at him with a stunned look on her face. Quinn removed the glass as he smiled towards the girl and said, "Looking good, Greengrass." The stunned-looking blonde was his junior Daphne Greengrass. Quinn slowly walked towards her and took her gloved hand, bent over it and placed a kiss on her knuckles, and wished, "Happy Yuletide." Daphne was still stunned seeing Quinn here at the ministry as she knew little about Quinn, so it came as a surprise to her to see him here at the ball. Then she felt a heat rush through her cheeks when he complimented her and kissed her hand. It was when Quinn stepped back that she snapped out of her state and pulled her emotional occlumency skills to get control of her emotions, and erase the blush off her cheeks. "You were invited to the ball?" Daphne immediately asked. Quinn nodded and answered, "Yes, well, my grandfather was invited, and I am here with him." Daphne hummed as she wondered who Quinn's grandfather was. "Would you like something to drink?" politely asked Quinn. When Daphne nodded, Quinn walked back to the bar to get her a drink and refill his own. "So, who did you come with?" Quinn asked as he handed Daphne a glass of strawberry punch. "With my parents." Daphne's parents were Jacob and Sophie Greengrass. Jacob Greengrass was the head of the Grey political faction, and his wife Sophie Greengrass was no slouch either. She was the one who organized all the Grey faction gathering at her home to keep the Grey faction close with the help of these gatherings. The Grey faction members and families frequented Sophie's events to exchange information and strengthen their connections to remain strong, and a tight bunch within Wizengamot. Her contributions to the faction made her one of the core members of the Grey faction. "So, what does your grandfather do?" a nonchalant question came from Daphne as she sipped her punch. Quinn glanced at her, looked at her, discreetly trying to fish for information, so sneaky, it made Quinn smile inwardly. He gave the question thought for a split second and answered, "My grandfather owns the Scrivenshafts quill shop in Hogsmeade. Proudly supplying quills and parchment to Hogwarts since I don't know when." It was technically a legitimate answer, and Quinn wasn't lying. He was just omitting most of the things his grandfather did for a living. "Scrivenshafts quill shop?" Daphne asked, not sure what to make of what Quinn had told her. "Is a quill and parchment shop enough to be invited to a ministry ball?" "Yes, Scrivenshafts quill shop. You must have ordered some stationery through mail order," said Quinn while enjoying the confusion that Daphne was feeling. "Why yes, I have," said the girl. She wanted to ask how warranted an invitation to the ministry ball but held back as it would come out as rude. "This is so much fun." Quinn was going to have some more, but their conversation was interrupted when a lady appeared and spoke. "Daphne, dear." A lady dressed in dark forest green walked to the pair and called for Daphne, and the girl turned to address the lady. "Yes, Mum?" Sophie Greengrass had the same blonde hair as her daughter, but unlike her daughter, who had blue eyes, she had hazel irises. She had her blonde locks styled in a single braid falling over her shoulder and had simply yet elegant jewelry adorning her neck and ears, and looked overall a graceful and stunning woman. Quinn's mischievous thoughts all vanished as he single-mindedly stared at the lady in front of him. Quinn couldn't take his eyes off of her and simply looked at her without blinking. Beautiful was the only word he could think of to describe her. He could do better, but right now, Quinn wasn't thinking normally. Daphne, would you introduce your friend to me? Sophie Greengrass asked her daughter. She knew how her daughter was when it came to friends, so it came as a surprise when she saw her daughter talk to a person Sophie didn't recognize, much less a boy. Daphne nodded and introduced, "This is Quinn West, he studies at Hogwarts, second year, Ravenclaw." Sophie's pupils widened a fraction as he heard the surname West. She carefully looked at the now introduced Quinn West and saw the black hair and stone-grey eyes. He is from the West family, all right, the features match. I didn't know that he had another child in his family, thought Sophie as she watched Quinn. Quinn, who was stunned because of Sophie Greengrass, came back to his senses and stepped closer to her and took her hand to kiss her knuckles. Quinn looked up and asked, "Are you by chance a Veela?" Words of flattery flowed out Quinn's mouth as he held Sophie's hand. Sophie was surprised for a second before a chuckle escaped her lips, as he smiled at the little guy in front of her while the other Greengrass looked scandalized at her schoolmate's words. "No, little child, I am not a Veela," said a smiling Sophie Greengrass. Quinn shook his head and said, "Please, call me Quinn." Daphne cleared her throat and frowned towards Quinn. "Would you let go of my mother's hand, already?" Quinn looked at his own hands and saw that he was still holding Sophie's hands and let go of her hand. "My apologies." He felt a heat of embarrassment rush to his cheeks but shook it off without any delay and asked, "May I know your name, my lady?" "My name is Sophie Greengrass from the House of Greengrass," she replied with a beautiful smile on her face and offered a question of her own. "By any chance, are you related to George West?" Quinn straightened up at that question and nodded with a modest smile on his face. "Yes, Mrs. Greengrass, I am Quinn West, grandson of George West. It is a pleasure to meet you." "Quinn, I must ask, I have never seen you before. Usually, it is your grandfather, or sometimes your sister, but it is the first time I have seen you." "Indeed, it is my first time at one of these events. I must say just meeting you have made coming to this ball worth it." Quinn didn't know why, but he was laying it on thick. Sophie once again chuckled at the flattering words before turning to Daphne. "I have interrupted enough, I will leave you two alone." She needed to tell her husband about George West's other grandchild and how apparently he was friends with their daughter. She nodded towards Quinn, who waved her goodbye and sighed with a smile on his face. He turned to Daphne and said, "Now, where were we?" Daphne just glared at Quinn and walked away, and Quinn followed after her while saying, "Hey, what did I do? Greengrass? Greengrass?" Chapter 34, Malfoys, and Dancing. It took a while before Quinn could make Daphne talk to him again. Quinn felt embarrassed because of his reaction towards Daphne's mother, Sophie Greengrass, and apologized to Daphne for them. "But, she is absolutely gorgeous," he thought, but didn't say it out loud in the fear that the only person he could talk to at the ball would not speak to him again. "So, Daphne, tell me about Slytherin Common Room. I want to know the difference between all four houses' Common Room. If you tell me, I will tell you about the Ravenclaw Common Room," asked Quinn, hoping to break the ice and keep the conversation going. Daphne took a moment to compose her words before saying, "Our common room is a dungeon-like room with greenish lamps and chairs. The dungeon extends partway under the lake, giving the light in the room a green tinge." Quinn stopped her and asked with wide eyes, "You are saying that the Slytherin Common Room had windows that show an underwater scene?" It fascinated for him to hear about such architectural design in Slytherin's Common Room. Daphne lightly nodded and added, "The water near the windows is never murky, allowing a lot of light to pass through, and because of the lake, the color of the light is a really bewitching green. The common room has lots of low-backed black and dark green button-tufted, leather sofas, and dark wood cupboards. It is decorated with tapestries featuring the adventures of famous medieval Slytherins. It has quite a grand atmosphere, albeit quite a cold one." "Have you seen the giant squid from the common room windows?" he asked, genuinely excited about the scenery. Daphne looked at him, her eyes shining. "Yes, I have seen the tentacles of the giant squid. Often they would pass by the windows, and the sound of swishing water created is quite relaxing, especially at night." She looked at Quinn and asked, "Your turn?" Quinn smiled and revealed, Ravenclaw Common Room has an exclusive library that is furnished by Professor Flitwick. He makes sure that they are relevant to the current topics in the class and quite a few interesting reads outside of the classroom material. That sounds like a significant advantage to the Ravenclaw students, said Daphne, showing a glimpse of her competitive side. Quinn shrugged and countered, Professor Snape gives private potion and defense against dark arts lessons to Slytherin students. That is also a significant advantage. I have heard that a lot of Slytherin students perform well in exam practicals. How did you know that? We aren't allowed to reveal that to anyone outside the house, Daphne asked with suspicion evident in her turquoise blue eyes. Quinn scoffed, not all Slytherin are secretive. Some of your housemates can be quite braggy when they think no one is listening. When Daphne quirked her brow, Quinn winked mischievously. Quinn looked at Daphne and said, my grandfather said to show up to see him once in a while. How about we go see him? You seemed interested in meeting him. Daphne nodded, thinking about when her mother asked Quinn if he was related to George West. Excellent, let's see, where is he? Quinn looked around the hall, spotted a small group, and saw his grandfather standing tall among the people. There is he, let's go. Scene break. George West was mingling with other people at the ball, listening to their offers of so-called once-in-a-lifetime business opportunities with one ear, and zoning out their actually third-rate business plans with another ear. Grandfather, he heard the familiar voice of his grandson and turned back to see Quinn walking towards him. It greatly surprised George to see Quinn walking with a girl. Grandfather, let me introduce, Quinn gestured towards the girl with him and continued, Daphne Greengrass, a friend of mine from Hogwarts. Quinn turned to Daphne and repeated, this is my grandfather, George West. A Greengrass, huh, thought George as he smiled towards the girl and said, Happy Yuletide, little lady. After greeting her, he asked, are you related to Jacob Greengrass? Daphne Greengrass nodded while courtesying, yes, I am Jacob Greengrass's daughter. Speaking of the devil, Jacob Greengrass appeared with Sophie Greengrass just as Daphne introduced herself. A happy Yuletide to you, Mr. West, said the man as he strolled to the group with a smile on his face. Jacob Greengrass was a tall man with black hair and blue eyes. He had traditional aristocratic features with an angular face and a strong jawline. Quinn observed the man named Jacob Greengrass and noticed, his legs are aligned with his shoulders, 5 inches apart, weight is distributed equally, and his whole body is projected as a straight line. Standard body language for confidence. Jacob had a glass in one hand, and his other arm was looped with his wife's arm. Quinn moved his eyes to look at the Greengrass couple as a whole and saw comfortable chemistry between the two, none of the pair overshadowing each other. Yeah, this guy is set, thought Quinn as he concluded studying Jacob Greengrass. George greeted the man with a firm handshake, Jacob. Jacob freed his arm from his wife's and shook it back. George looked at Sophie and smiled while kissing her knuckles, Sophie. He looked at the pair, greeted them together, a prosperous Yuletide to you as well. Did you meet my eldest daughter, said Jacob while glancing at Daphne with a warm smile. George nodded in response, yes, my grandson introduced me to her. He patted Quinn's shoulder. Quinn stepped forward and shook hands with Jacob Greengrass, Happy Yuletide, Mr. Greengrass. My name is Quinn West. He turned to Sophie Greengrass and smiled, we meet again, Mrs. Greengrass. So, I hear you study at Hogwarts. How are you finding studying, said Jacob as he observed Quinn. Yes, sir. I am a second-year student, Ravenclaw. As for studying, it is quite exciting to learn magic every day. The teachers are talented and helpful, well, most of them are. When Quinn said that, Daphne almost snorted, thinking about the droning bins and stuttering Quirrell. Good, good, Sophie was a Ravenclaw when she was studying at Hogwarts, and I was a Slytherin, said Jacob as he looked at his wife. Quinn nodded, and a stray thought passed his mind, beauty and brains. He thought about Sophie and then mentally shook his head, focus, Quinn. Though he did brightly smile towards Sophie when he heard she was a Ravenclaw. Jacob glanced at Daphne before asking, how did you get to meet my daughter? Quinn smiled while recalling the train ride to Hogwarts, I met her during the train ride to Hogwarts. She and Tracy Davis came to my compartment looking for a space to sit. His interactions that day made him chuckle, it was quite the fun train ride. Scene break. After talking for a while, Quinn and Daphne decided to leave the adults and talk amongst themselves, but just a minute after leaving the adults, they heard. Greengrass, fancy meeting you here. Both of them turned back to see a slender boy with sleek platinum blonde hair that was slicked back tightly. He had cold grey eyes, a pale complexion, and rather sharp and pointed features. When Quinn saw the boy, a smile appeared on his face while Daphne sighed in exasperation. "Mr. Malfoy, indeed, it is quite a fancy meeting you here," said Quinn as he grinned at Draco. Looking at the smiling Quinn made Daphne calm down and made Draco frown. "You!" Draco immediately recognized Quinn and was shocked to see him here. "What are you doing here?" Quinn looked around the hall before answering, "You know, attending the ball, enjoying some delicacies, what people do at balls." "I mean, what are you doing at the ministry ball?" Draco's eyes narrowed. "Who would invite someone like you?" Quinn shrugged. "It is the ministry ball, so I guess the ministry. Why, where did you get your invitation?" "Mr. Malfoy, you might not like to hear this, but if you got your invitation from somewhere else, it might not be valid. It could get you into trouble." By the end, Quinn had a look of fake worry on his face. He thoroughly enjoyed Draco's red face. "Greengrass, why would you like to hang with someone like him? He has no respect for his betters," asked Draco, not answering Quinn's retort. "Better him than you," was all she said in response. Hearing that, Quinn voiced his discontent. "Hey, that makes it sound as I am on the same level as him. Not cool, and I bought you a drink." Daphne said nothing in response, and Quinn crossed his arms in mock anger. Seeing the two ignore him, Draco stomped in rage and stormed off. Quinn looked back towards Draco, not hearing him, but didn't see him in front of them. "Where did he go?" "I didn't get to wish him a happy Yuletide." "He left when you were being dramatic," Daphne replied. Quinn quirked his brow. "Dramatic? You hurt me, Greengrass." "I am not dramatic, I just have a colorful personality." "Right. There is he, father." Quinn turned to see Draco dragging Lucius Malfoy with him. "Draco, what are you doing, man? You are really hurting my impression of you," was Quinn's thoughts before Draco and Lucius Malfoy arrived near him. "So, you are the one who is insulting him," sneered Lucius as he looked down at Quinn. Quinn looked confused. "You seem to be misinformed, I said nothing of sorts to your son." "He lies, he made fun of me at the Hogwarts Express and just before," screamed Draco as he pointed at Quinn. Lucius looked at Quinn and noticed that the child was just smiling, not looking nervous at all. So, he decided to inform the ignorant child who he was dealing with. "Child, what is your name, and where are your parents? Call them so I can have a talk with them and teach them how to raise a child," sneered Lucius. Quinn nodded and replied, "Okay, wait a moment. I will bring my parents." Then Quinn ran off to follow Lucius' orders. Draco sneered and announced, he will finally get what was coming for him. After a minute, Quinn back and called out to Lucius, "I brought him." Lucius smirked as he thought about ripping into some chump, but when he turned back, Lucius froze. The person he saw shocked him out of his mind. "What is this I hear, Lucius? You are taking part in children's squabble," said George West as he stared at Lucius with a seemingly bored expression. Lucius stared wordlessly at one of the people he feared. If Lucius Malfoy considered Jacob Greengrass his rival, then George West was another level than him. George West was a sleeping threat to his political and financial authority in Britain. When he was young, his father, Abraxas Malfoy, had told him that when it came to money, West family outclassed every other family in Britain, including the Blacks, when they were at their highest point. He had told Lucius that, unlike the other British families, the West family business spanned across continents. If they deployed all their resources, they could take over magical Britain's economy. After that, Lucius Malfoy had first-hand seen George West's viciousness in business. George West had left the country before the war got worse. When it ended, there were opportunities to make money, and Lucius wanted to use this chance to recover the wealth he had lost in the war. But by the time he was done with his trials at the ministry, George West had nonchalantly returned to Britain and took advantage of the aftermath of the war before Lucius could even start. Even Jacob Greengrass had difficulty competing for resources, even though Greengrass was the first to start. "Mr. West, I heard you were at the ball." "But, why are you following this child?" asked Lucius, praying that it won't be what he was thinking. Alas, it was the thing he was fearing. "This is my grandson, Quinn West. You asked for him to get his parents, so I came. Now what is it you wanted to talk about?" said George. Lucius looked down towards Quinn and saw the striking similarities between him and George West. Both had black hair and stone-grey eyes. "I didn't know you were his grandfather," said Lucius, not knowing what to say next. "Now you know, so what is it you want to talk about?" asked George. Lucius cursed his luck that brought him face to face against this man. "It is nothing, I just wanted to solve this children's fight peacefully. You know how children can take things too far." "I see, then I proclaim this squabble over," said George and turned to Quinn. Quinn, behave and get along with others, but he didn't sound serious at all. "Come now, Lucius, accompany me for a drink. Let's talk business. I have been doing some stuff you would absolutely love to hear about," said George with a smile that didn't fit well with Lucius at all. Quinn watched as the two adults walked away, and Lucius was not looking enthusiastic at all. He turned to face Draco and said, "Mr. Malfoy, I missed the chance, but I wish you a happy Yuletide." Malfoy looked awkward, standing in front of Quinn and Daphne, not knowing what to do. He had called his father to take care of Quinn, but somehow his father had been taken away by another man, with his father not being able to refuse. Listening to Quinn wish him a happy Yuletide was all that humiliation he could take for the day, and stomped away. Daphne turned to Quinn and asked, "Do you dislike Malfoy?" Quinn shook his head, answering, "Not at all. It takes a lot more than that to make me dislike someone. Maybe a couple more years of this on a regular basis would be enough for me to develop a dislike for him. I don't even consider him an annoyance at this point." Quinn cared little for Draco's attitude and found it not worth his time to care for his silly, spoiled behavior. He turned to Daphne and asked, "Do you want to dance?" Daphne stood still and blinked a couple of times. "Why?" "I have been learning to dance for so many years, it would be a waste not to make use of it," said Quinn while shrugging. The blonde stared at Quinn for a while before nodding. Quinn smiled and extended his hand to Daphne, who took it and let Quinn lead her onto the floor. On the floor, both Quinn and Daphne straightened their backs and stepped closer to each other. Quinn took Daphne's raised right hand in his raised left hand, and Quinn placed his right on her shoulder blade while she put her left on his shoulder. Daphne shifted a smidge to her left such that she would be on Quinn's right, so their legs move between each other and knees don't hit. When they were set, Quinn took the lead, and both began dancing, with Quinn pleasantly smiling as he made conversation. "Any plans for the vacations?" "Spend some time with my sister. She felt down when I left for Hogwarts and was quite excited when I returned home for the break," said Daphne, a soft look in her usually sharp eyes. She looked at Quinn, expecting him to answer his own question. "I will probably remain at home for the break, doing nothing interesting." "Oh, yeah, I am going to learn how to make clothes." Daphne tipped her head to the side. "You mean sewing?" Quinn nodded enthusiastically. "Kind of. I found a book list on tailoring charms and how to make all kinds of clothes from different fabrics like cotton, wool, even leather. I skimmed through it, and the books also show how to weave various charms into threads or clothes." He remembered how Madame Malkin's shop had prepared his clothes in such a short time. Even the robes he was wearing today were made within hours. "I am most excited to work on the leather of different animals and beasts." "Oh, goody." Quinn finished with a twinkle in his eyes. "You are weird," was all Daphne said in reply. She also complimented him, "You are a good dancer." Quinn smiled, "Only because you are making leading so easy." Complimenting her in an offhand way. Scene break. "Look dear, Daphne is dancing," said Sophie Greengrass, getting the attention of her husband. Jacob Greengrass turned his head to see his eldest daughter dancing on the floor with the West boy. He looked closer and added, "And she is talking with him." Sophie rested a hand on her cheek and commented, "They look cute. Maybe I should ask the person with the camera to snap some photos." Jacob hummed, not liking the idea at all. His eyes narrowing as he watched the West boy chuckle, and even though his daughter wasn't, he could tell that she was enjoying herself. Jacob glanced towards George West, who was talking with a clearly uncomfortable-looking Lucius Malfoy. He turned back to look at the dancing pair. Sophie Greengrass looped her arm around her husband's arm and asked, "Would you like to dance?" Jacob looked at his wife, smiling, "Of course, my lady. I would love to have this dance with you." He took her hand and guided her to the floor. Chapter 35, Entrance of the Vault, Icy Corridor, and the Disaster. The break ended, and the Hogwarts student population returned to the castle via the Hogwarts Express. A snowy Hogwarts castle greeted them, with its entirety covered in ice and snow because of the January snowfall. Even in the cold, the castle looked majestic and full of life. Quinn passed by the common room when he noticed Michael Corner and Anthony Goldstein sitting in front of a foxglove herb sitting in a jar. Anthony had the glass jar in his hand, his other hand on the lid, unscrewing it. Quinn frowned and immediately whipped out his fake wand and shot a light pinching hex on Anthony's hand that was unscrewing the lid. "Ouch!" squealed Anthony as he rubbed the back of his hand on his robes. Both of them turned to the offender and watched Quinn walk towards them. "What was that for?" asked Anthony as he frowned at Quinn. Quinn pointed at the foxglove jar. "That herb is poisonous. You would definitely have gone to the hospital wing if you had picked it with bare hands. It can lead to death, and if Professor Snape found out, he would make your life miserable in the potions lesson." He waved his fake wand, and the glass jar floated from Anthony's hands back to the table. "Just a piece of advice, when handling potion ingredients or tending to herbs in herbology, always," Quinn repeated, "always, wear gloves. It is much safer and is an excellent work habit." Quinn sat down near them, took out a pair of leather gloves from his robes, and put them on. Michael's brow twitched. He looked towards Quinn's face and asked, "You keep gloves in your robes?" Quinn nodded, picking up the glass jar, looking at the foxglove. "I have all sorts of things in my robes, gloves is just one of those things." He looked at Anthony and questioned, "What are you brewing with a foxglove?" Michael took out the first-year potions book from his book bag and showed it to Quinn. "We are preparing for the Pompeion potion that Professor Snape is going to teach in our next potions class." Quinn glanced at the chapter for the Pompeion potion and smiled as he recalled its effects. "Ah, the potion that turns the drinker's head into a pumpkin. This was a good one," chuckled Quinn. Last year, he had used the potion on himself to scare many unsuspecting Ravenclaws as they entered the common room on Halloween. It scared the crap out of them to see a pumpkin head charge towards them. Anthony nodded but frowned in criticism. "Why didn't they teach us this before Halloween? It would have been perfect for Halloween." "They teach it after Halloween because the staff doesn't want hordes of students with pumpkin heads on Halloween, though it would be quite fun to orchestrate such a scene," said Quinn, flipping through the pages of the book. He had learned to brew this potion when he was 8, with Elliot at the West Manor. "Why do they even this type of potion?" asked Michael, not seeing the practical use of the spell. "Turning a person's head into a pumpkin sure isn't practical, but the reason it is taught because it is one of the simpler transfiguration potions. Pompeion potion is the best way to introduce this line of potions to students," explained Quinn as he returned the book to Michael. "If Pompeion potion was on the simple end of the transfiguration potion difficulty scale, then Polyjuice potion was on the hard end of the transfiguration potions." Okay, keep this in mind." Quinn waved his wand, and a transfigured replica of Foxglove appeared on the table. He took out a knife from his robes and removed the cover from the blade. "You would want to slice the foxglove at a diagonal angle, like this." Quinn showed the type of cut on the transfigured foxglove. "This way, you would get maximum surface area on the slices. It is an important part of the recipe for Pompeion potion." They did not specify the instruction to slice foxglove in the recipe from the Hogwarts book. Quinn had researched foxglove and its properties, the Pompeion potion, and why was foxglove used in the potion. From all these things, Quinn was able to discover the ideal cut for the foxglove. Something as simple as a specific way to cut a single ingredient can change how the potion would end up at the end. "Always research the ingredients before you brew," advised Quinn as he cleaned his knife before sheathing it back into the covers and storing his things back into his robes. "Remember it or note it down before I vanish it," said Quinn to the 2 first years. The 2 scrambled, fishing out their parchments to write everything Quinn had told them. Quinn vanished the transfigured foxglove and said while getting up, "Always remember to wear gloves while handling herbs and potion ingredients. Now, see you guys later." Anthony and Michael looked at each other before taking out their gloves from their book bags, wearing them so that they could get a hand on the real foxglove. Scene break. After curfew, Quinn searched the corridors of the 5th floor, looking for the first vault. He had scoured the 4th and 5th floor with the bare eye but had found nothing out of the ordinary. But after returning from the Christmas break, he had switched his means of investigating by using various detection magics. Wisps of magic emanated from Quinn towards all walls, floors, and the ceiling. Quinn was walking around, checking his surroundings for illusions, hollow walls, trapdoors, heat signatures, out-of-place charms planted into the walls, or any parameter that Quinn could think about and find in books on detection magic. Quinn walked with his eyes on Reckon, checking and making sure that he wasn't seen. When he reached the leftmost corridor on the 5th floor, various detection spells returned positive feedback from a specific square piece of wall. "What do we have here?" said Quinn as he stepped back from the wall, shooting another wave of detection spells on the wall and once again getting positive feedback. "Great, this is great," said Quinn, walking to the wall and putting his hand on it, funneling magic into the wall, trying distinct patterns and arrangements to get some kind of reaction. After trying various methods, the wall gave no reaction whatsoever. It didn't budge, shift, morph, or outright disappear. "This is the wall." "It has to be," said Quinn, summoning Reckon and shifting it to his current position. He placed his finger on the wall's position on Reckon, marking it so that Quinn could easily find his way to this area of the 5th floor. "I need to find a way to unlock this wall," muttered Quinn, staring at the unassuming wall. It had no distinct features than the surrounding walls, but Quinn could feel the variety of charms placed into the bricks making up the wall. After observing the wall for another half an hour, Quinn moved away from the wall. He was thoroughly determined to do some research work to find what the charmed wall was hiding. Scene break. Test number 1, projecting magic in the pattern of Mana's alphabet. Alphabet meaning man, announced Quinn as a charmed pen that did the same work as a dictation pen, wrote notes for Quinn. With his hand on the wall, Quinn sent his magic into the wall, tracing the pre-decided pattern. A pattern appeared on the wall in the shape of the Mana's alphabet. The wall glowed once, but the glow died down, and the wall showed no sign of change. Quinn cracked his knuckles and announced to his dicta pen. Test number 2, projecting magic in the pattern of Mana's alphabet. Alphabet meaning man applied in a triangle configuration. This time 3 Mana's alphabets glowed on the wall, and when they fully formed, 3 faint lines of magic joined them to each other. The wall glowed up and died down, but Quinn saw no difference in the wall. Test number 3, projecting magic in the pattern of Mana's alphabet. Alphabet meaning man applied in a pentagon configuration. Test number 83, projecting magic in the pattern of Jaifu alphabet. Alphabet meaning gift. Applied in an offside double star configuration. Test number 346, projecting magic in the pattern of Tfio, Eol, and Tentrok alphabets. Alphabet meanings castle, estate, entrance. Applied in a linear configuration. Test number 421, projecting magic in the pattern of Isa and Logra alphabets. Alphabet meanings ice and sea. Applied in an overlapping configuration. Test number 613, projecting magic in the pattern of Faya, Agni, Whirl, and Tone alphabets. Alphabet meanings fire, wall, and open. Applied in a diamond configuration. After 2 months of running tests on the bloody piece of wall that refused to budge, Quinn finally got a hit. Test number 713, projecting magic in the pattern of Isa, Izaz, YR, and Tiz alphabets. Alphabet meanings ice, death, and ice applied in a dual branch, Y, configuration. Quinn's one hand was on the wall while he was holding his notes in his other hand. Quinn wasn't expecting the wall to open and read the next configuration from his 1000 pattern list. But his eyes widened when the patterns he was funneling magic in glowed brighter than ever in his 2-month-long trials. Quinn stepped back a step, looking with wide eyes as he saw the bricks vibrate and came to a sudden stop. Line by line, the bricks moved aside, leaving a square entrance in the wall he had spent hours in front of. Merlin, Morgana, Solomon, Circe. The stupid wall opened up. "Take that, you unresponsive, dumb, freaking mad piece of brick," shouted Quinn as he collected his notes, storing them into his book bag. Quinn vanished the bar stool he was sitting on and gleefully yet carefully entered the entrance in the wall. Quinn stepped into the opening and felt that he passed through a membrane. The moment he stepped past the membrane, a freezing cold suddenly appeared, lowering the surrounding temperature drastically. Friar W wasn't he joking when he said a V-volt so cold that even D-Death might die, said Quinn as his teeth rattled because of the cold. The charms in his clothes did absolutely nothing to shield Quinn from the biting cold as he walked deeper into the new corridor. Within a few steps, there was a thin layer of ice on the walls, and Quinn's breath became visible. Quinn could barely get by. He had to ramp the heat around him with magic so that he could function normally in the freezing cold. Even then, he still felt cold because he couldn't turn the heat up anymore in fear of burning his clothes. Slowly, the ice got thicker, and the surrounding turned icy blue because of the thick casings of ice everywhere. After a short walk, Quinn finally reached a pure icy blue corner of the corridor. The height and width of the corridor increased to open into an enormous gate. A gate made of pure ice, and in front of the gate was lazily spinning snowflake-shaped icicle. The snowflake was huge, big enough to cover the enormous gate. Quinn climbed down the stairs that lead to the larger end of the corridor, but the moment Quinn climbed down the last step, the cold, which he thought was already freezing, turned into a cold so frigid, so bone-biting that Quinn's body immediately began showing signs of hypothermia. Quinn looked down to see his fingers slowly turning blue, freezing over. Ice began covering his hair, quickly freezing them. Quinn's heartbeat began to slow down, and his eyesight started to turn dim. And these were the things that Quinn could feel. There were a lot more symptoms that Quinn wasn't even aware of. Quinn's survival instincts started to go crazy as his entire being screamed at him to leave this place. It took all of Quinn's focus and the entirety of his magic capabilities to push himself back up the stairs and escape the freezing cold. The moment the cold reduced, Quinn collapsed on the floor. The surrounding temperature felt like heaven compared to the frigid hell down the steps. Quinn's body started to glow a bright red as his magic began to show itself in this time of need. Quinn's magic began operating on its own, working to keep him alive. Raising the temperature of his body, preventing him from going into shock. His magic was responding to his will and wish to live, a special brand of accidental magic. All Quinn could do was to make sure he was awake and not unconscious, giving his magic a fair chance to fight for survival. And that was what he did, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes as his pale body laid on the floor, waiting and wishing for his magic to make it so that he could live past this disaster. The red light formed a cocoon around Quinn, completely covering him in its light. Scene break. Quinn didn't know how much time had passed, but the red cocoon of light subsided, and he was finally in a condition to eventually able to stand up. His legs felt like lead and jelly at the same time. Quinn slowly dragged his weak and dead pale body out of the icy corridor to the 5th floor corridor. He was so out of it that he didn't even notice the wall close behind him. Currently, Quinn only had one objective, and that was to haul himself to the hospital wing. Slowly but surely, Quinn made his way from the 5th floor to the 1st floor where the hospital wing was located. Quinn had to be extra careful at the grand staircase, so the journey was excruciatingly long. Quinn almost fainted several times along the way. Quinn entered the hospital wing and plopped himself on one of the beds. The room was dim, with scare lighting from the few candles and moonlight. The time was already past midnight, and the room was dead silent. He dazedly looked around the room to see if there was anyone here but couldn't find a patient or the matron. Quinn wasn't even sure how to call for the matron, Madame Poppy Pomfrey. He had been to the hospital wing, but he never interacted with the Mediwitch who ran this whole operation. He didn't have the magic or mental faculties to heal himself from this, so she was his only choice. Quinn wheezed in pain and fatigue. It was getting difficult for him to stay awake. The moment he had stood up in the icy corridor, his magic was back in his control, no longer working on its own. So, Quinn had consciously maintained his body temperature throughout his journey and barely had any magic left in him. The accidental magic had taken a lot out of him, leaving him peanuts to work with. Eventually, Quinn ran out of magic and sank into unconsciousness. With the last drop of magic exhausted, Quinn fell unconscious, saying goodbye to the conscious world. Scene break. Quinn groggily woke up to see the hospital wing ceiling he had fallen unconscious to last night. Unlike last night, Quinn felt warm and cozy and not the freezing and frigid cold of last night. Quinn could see the daylight coming from the windows, illuminating the room. He had slept through the night. He could feel a bed cover on his body, which meant that Madame Pomfrey had found him and had at least started his treatment. He tried to get up but felt a body-wide pain erupt from every corner. "Ah!" he yelled in pain as he collapsed back on the bed. The pain came from his bones, skin, organs, head, and everywhere Quinn could imagine. "Oh, Morgana. You are awake, Mr. West," said a voice, moving closer to him. Quinn slowly turned his neck, not wanting the pain to assault him again, to see Madame Pomfrey, dressed in her usual Mediwitch uniform, standing by his bedside, casting charms all over his body. Various spell lights made contact with his body, telling Madame Pomfrey the current status of his health. "Should I set my affairs in order, Madame Pomfrey?" said Quinn in a crackling, barely audible voice. He tried to crack a joke, but his voice turned it into a morbid statement. "Mr. West, what in the world happened last night? I found you with severe ice burns, frostbite, damaged organs, brittle bones, and. She couldn't complete her list thinking about the severity of Quinn's condition. "I found you after I woke up this morning, and imagine my shock to see you battered, pale, lying on one of my beds, completely unconscious," she said as she applied balms and creams on his body, causing Quinn to hiss in pain. He clutched his fist to endure the pain, and even that brought him more pain. Quinn looked at Madame Pomfrey and asked, "Dear matron, can you give me something for pain? I can't even move my finger without harsh pain. I will pray to you every day if you just fix me up with SS something." His voice was still raspy and barely a whisper. The jokes were just Quinn's way to distract himself from the pain. Poppy Pomfrey frowned. "Mr. West, if you can still joke around, then maybe you don't need to something for pain." She ignored his repeated hisses due to pain and continued to apply ointments on his body. Quinn wanted to cry and couldn't do anything but stare at the ceiling, thinking about last night. "I got too excited about opening the vault and rushed in blindly," thought Quinn. He knew the warnings from Friar's words and riddles but neglected them because of foolish emotions. Quinn felt that Fiddle's riddle was easy, and it was for a reason. The cold in the vault was too much for Quinn's body or magic to handle. It was pure luck that Quinn was able to push himself up the stairs to exit the killing cold. "A vault so cold that even death might die," repeated Quinn in his mind, thinking how true that statement had turned out to be. "What led to this, Mr. West?" asked Pomfrey, her voice showing that she didn't want any nonsense. Quinn's condition was gravely serious when she found him this morning. "I fell into a size F cauldron full of freezing potion," was the answer Quinn gave. Quinn just made up an answer that would lead Quinn to his current condition. "You fell into a cauldron of the freezing potion?" asked Pomfrey, incredulously. Quinn nodded weakly. "Why were you brewing a freezing potion in March?" Quinn sighed, and even that hurt a little bit, causing him to cough, which in turn a little more. "I am Ravenclaw. I saw the recipe, had the urge to brew it, so I did." "Madame Pomfrey, it might surprise you to hear that we can be quite stupid." Madame Pomfrey stared at Quinn and interrogated, "Mr. West, a cauldron full of freezing potion won't cause this level of harm. Your injuries are much too severe." Quinn called on his confidence and scoffed, "It will if I am the one brewing the potion. Matron, heal me back to normal, and I will brew you top-grade potions. Murtlap essence, calming draught, sleeping draught, poison antidotes, blood replenishing potion, pepper-up potion, cure for boils, or any healing-grade potions you like for an entire school year." By the time Quinn was done speaking, his throat was burning with agony. Madame Pomfrey sighed in annoyance, thinking about the stupidity of the students. She had gotten numb at the students' bumbling action that brought them to her doors. She sighed once more and informed, "Wait here, I will inform Professor Flitwick. He asked me to inform him when you wake up." Quinn gave a light nod and waited for his head of the house to come and tear him a new one. The half-goblin had clearly inherited the fierce traits from his lineage, and Quinn didn't want to face that in his current condition. Quinn just hoped that Flitwick would go easy on him. "Mr. Quinn West." Quinn heard the bellowing voice from his charms professor. "Of course not," sighed Quinn as he got ready to face the music. Chapter 36, Recovery, Plan, and Rage. The stone-grey-eyed boy sat on a hospital wing bed, with his feet stretched straight and his back leaning against the headboard. He was reading a book on cold-related injuries and maladies. Quinn had borrowed the book from Madame Pomfrey. She had given it to him because Quinn was bored and was disturbing her by trying to talk to her. Just in front of Quinn's torso laid a bed table with multitudes of notes and papers on cold-related dangers that Quinn had read in the medical book he was given. If he was going to enter the vault, he needed to know the dangers. Reading upon the medical viewpoint was an excellent place to start as any. I have to worry about hypothermia, frostnip, chilblains, immersion foot, and frostbite. Extreme climatic conditions didn't suit the human body. The low temperature could do severe damage to the human body. Oh, there are more: psychiatric and psychosocial disorders, snow blindness, dehydration, and constipation. Quinn heaved a heavy sigh as he picked up another sheet of paper and found the most worrying thing he had discovered while researching. Prolonged stay in the extreme frigid cold can cause the magical activity in the body to become sluggish, and hindered because of the effect cold can have on the body. Quinn's primary asset was magic, and if the extreme coldness in the icy corridor could hinder his magical capabilities, then Quinn was in big problem. I need a way to keep my body warm in there, or else I am screwed, murmured Quinn. If he could keep his body from being affected by the cold, he could keep his magical prowess in there to work on getting to the gate and open it. Picking another paper, Quinn read the core problem he needed to deal with while in the icy corridor. Blood, whispered Quinn. Blood was the problem and solution to his survival in the vault. Blood was everywhere in the body, it was deep inside the bones, and it was present just under the skin. To keep his body at a proper temperature, Quinn needed to keep his blood warm so that it could flow throughout his body and keep it warm. When body temperature fell on exposure to cold, several protective mechanisms were recruited to generate additional heat. For example, the muscles produce additional heat through shivering. Peripheral vasoconstriction diverted blood flow to organs, such as the heart and brain. However, as less warm blood reaches the skin, body parts such as the fingers, toes, ears, and nose cool more rapidly. If body temperature fell much below a certain point, these protective mechanisms would stop working, and the body couldn't rewarm itself. As tissue began to freeze, ice crystals were formed within the cells. Rubbing the frozen tissue would promote cell damage from these crystals, leading to more damage Quinn didn't want. Additionally, as intracellular fluids freeze, extracellular fluid enters the cell, and there is an increase in the levels of extracellular salts due to water transfer. This caused damage even after exiting the frigid region, as when the ice melts, there would be an influx of salts into the tissue, further damaging the cell membranes. Blood got its heat mainly from the energy given off by cellular metabolism, and the cold in the icy corridor would slow all down the cellular metabolism throughout his body. The moment that happened, hypothermia would set in, and most of his organs, especially the heart and brain, would become sluggish and eventually stop working. Blood magic. I need to research upon blood magic, thought Quinn. Blood magic was classified under dark arts, which meant that they did not teach it in Hogwarts. All of these problems could be subverted if I can keep an even flow of warm blood throughout my body. I have some books on blood magic from the travel collection, 2 that I bought after that, 3 medi-healing books, Quinn thought. Quinn tapped his chin and continued, there might be some in the restricted section in the library. I might have to search the room of requirement for books on blood magic, muttered Quinn as he charmed all the pages with dangerous material so that no one could read them. Whoa-ho! You have no hair, a voice brought Quinn out of his thoughts. He looked up to see Eddie and Marcus looking at him with big grins on their faces. You have no eyebrows, said Marcus, moving closer to his bedside. Quinn grinned and tapped his fingers on his bald head. Yeah, all of it was damaged beyond repair. Madame Pomfrey had to vanish all of it. It will grow back to their normal length in a day or 2. Eddie lightly squinted his eyes and commented, your skin is peeling, looks mad creepy. Quinn nodded as he stroked his face. Yep, that too was damaged, so she had to grow a new layer. The old one is going to come out slowly. What else got damaged? Asked Marcus as he sat down. A lot of my muscles, outer part of my bones, skin, my vocal cords, ears, and some of my organs. Quinn listed things off. Wicked. Here you go, said Eddie, this is the homework for this week. He handed Quinn a parchment roll with all homework topics listed on it. Quinn noticed Marcus staring at the bed table with a slight frown on his face. What's up, mate? Why the frown? Asked Quinn. How did you get all this stuff? You are the only person I have seen using muggle quill and parchment, asked Marcus, pointing at the paper on Quinn's bed table. Quinn smirked. I asked one of the house elves to bring them to me. Quinn looked proud and continued, it took praising them regularly, but now they sometimes respond if I call them. I asked them to bring my stuff here. Eddie sighed and asked, how did you even see them? I haven't seen a single one in all my time here. Quinn shrugged but didn't reply. Quinn didn't want to reveal that he regularly visited them at the kitchens and sometimes found house elves, while he was scouting through Wrekin and greeted them. Quinn didn't dare the West family house elf, Polly, because he didn't want his grandfather to know about his current state. Calling Polly would be doing just that. Quinn was sure she would pop here at Hogwarts, take a single look at him, and then pop back to the manor to inform his grandfather. "How long are you going to stay here?" asked Eddie as he popped a grape from Quinn's bedside stand. 3 to 4 more days, and I will be fully healed, back to my usual charming and remarkable self, replied Quinn as he put all his research material so that Marcus and Eddie won't pick them up for a read. Scene break. "You are bald." Quinn sighed as he looked up again to see the 2 familiar girls standing in front of his bed. "And you have no brows." "Oh, Merlin, you look mad hilarious," said the bubbly brunette as she moved closer to him. Quinn smiled and greeted the 2 Slytherin girls, Davis and Greengrass. "What caused you 2 to come here in the hospital wing?" Tracy put her hand on Quinn's bald head while speaking. "We wanted to see how you were doing." She gave his bald top a good rub, giggling all the time she did it. Quinn shook his head and said, "Thank you for coming. I appreciate it." He looked at Daphne and said, "Greengrass, I haven't seen you since the ball. How are you doing?" She nodded in return, but Tracy grinned as she danced her way back to Daphne's side. "Oh, yes. The ministry ball where you 2 danced. A real pity that there weren't any photos." Daphne rolled her eyes and simultaneously thought, "Believe me, Mother tried to have the photographer click some, but thankfully Father prevented her." A silly smile appeared on Quinn's face as he recalled Sophie Greengrass from the ball, but then he felt Daphne's glare and cleared his throat and put on a mischievous expression, wiggling his hairless brows. "Oh, fates. To think it would embarrass the great Daphne Greengrass to be seen with someone like me." He turned to Tracy and asked, "Aren't I pitiful?" Giving his best pitiful expression. Tracy nodded rapidly, siding with Quinn. She turned to Daphne, giving her the same look. The blonde Slytherin looked at her best friend and at Quinn, showing the same expression. She looked at them as if asking if their expressions were supposed to do something. Quinn and Tracy deflated and looked at each other. "Her defenses are quite impregnable," said Tracy. "We would have to develop a better attack strategy," replied Quinn. Then both of them shook hands like they were lifelong comrades on a journey towards truth. "Okay, stop this foolishness," said Daphne as she tapped on her wristwatch. "We need to go if we want to reach the class on time." Quinn nodded to Tracy, who waved him goodbye. He turned to Daphne, who was looking at him. The blonde opened her mouth and addressed him for this first time, "Get well soon, West." Quinn smiled and replied, "Thank you, Greengrass. I will." Scene break. 10 days after the incident in the icy corridor, Quinn was released from the hospital wing. He looked at Madame Pomfrey as he held her hands. "Matron, you came to me in time of need. Like a sole orb of brightness in a dark world. Like the relief in the world of anguish, you were there for me. You were there for me. I promise I won't ever forget you and visit you every week. You will wait for me, right?" Quinn's voice was gentle and his eyes warm. Pomfrey withdrew one of her hands from Quinn's and slapped him on the head that now had black hair. "Why do you have to be so talkative when you aren't reading?" she said with a sigh. "And, please don't come back here. I fear with you here, I won't be able to concentrate with your continuous talking." Quinn rubbed his head and replied, "No, I already promised that I will visit you, so look forward to my visits. And, I promised you potions, so I have to take care of that." He put on an expression of seriousness and pride, his eyes looking far away. "I am a man of my word." She sighed and shooed him away, not wanting to argue with her patient for 10 days. Quinn went to the Ravenclaw common room, answered the Eagle's riddle on his first try, and entered the room. There, many students congratulated him on his recovery. Quinn thanked them with a huge grin on his face but had to cut short the conversation because he was running a little late, and had to make his way to his class. He picked his book bag from his dorm, packed it for his needs, and ran to the Charms classroom for his lesson with Professor Flitwick. Quinn was 2 minutes late when he reached the classroom but opened the door without fear. Flitwick and students from Ravenclaw and Gryffindor all turned to look at him. "May I come in, Professor?" asked Quinn with a smile on his face. Flitwick jumped on his stack of books and chuckled, "Yes, Mr. West. Come in, come in. Take a seat. You look like you have fully recovered. Quinn nodded and replied as he took a seat, Yes, sir. I am back to normal. Madame Pomfrey did an outstanding job. Flitwick nodded and proceeded with his lecture. Now, where was I? Yes. We were talking about the slowing charm. Does anyone know what is the use of the slowing charm? Quinn's hand raised immediately at the speed of light. Flitwick pointed at Quinn. Yes, Mr. West. The slowing charm is a charm that could be used to slow the velocity of an object, and if performed with enough mastery, the spell can even cause the target to completely stop, answered Quinn. 3 points to Ravenclaw. Now, who would tell me the incantation for the slowing charm? Quinn's arm shot up once again, showing that he wanted to answer the question. When Flitwick gestured to Quinn, he explained, the incantation for slowing charm is Arresto Momentum. Excellent, take another 5 points. Next, who would tell me the wand movement for the slowing charm? Once again, Quinn's arm shot up, prompting Flitwick to ask him. The wand movement is in the shape of the alphabet, dem, with sharp corners, and all the lines are slanting, replied Quinn with no breaks in his voice. Excellent, 7 points to Ravenclaw, announced Flitwick, sounding extremely happy. Everybody looked at Quinn, wanting to know what was happening. Usually, Quinn would only answer when the teachers asked him to or wait till no one answered. Quinn looked at the class and grinned, I miss the classes. Wait for a day or two, it will pass. He winked and returned to raise his hand for another question. He kept the behavior for the entire day and answered every question in every class. He was sure that he annoyed a lot of people for the day. Scene break. Quinn opened the door to his AID office and entered it after whole 10 days. There was some dust, but with a wave of his hand, the office became clean instantly. Now, that is more like it, he smiled and then turned to the door in the glass partition that led to the workshop, but before entering, he checked the safety measures he installed every day before exiting the workshop. He first checked if the charms on the doors had been triggered. The result came out negative as the charms were still intact. Then Quinn crouched down to see if someone had ripped the strip of paper he pasted between the door and the frame, but the strip was still intact. Satisfied with his finding, Quinn opened the door, ripping the strip and triggering the charms, and entered his workshop. Once again, the room was clean the instant Quinn stepped into the shop. He walked around the shop, his hand gliding on the tables set up along the shop's walls. He smiled at the various tools hanging off the walls, cabinets, and cupboards holding notes and files on the work he had done here. Quinn looked up at the ceiling, and with a blink of his eyes, the everlasting candles lit up, illuminating the shop in yellow light. He placed his hands on the center island, looking around the shop. Quinn took out the cloth on which he built Reckon and placed it on the table. He unfolded it and unshrunk it on the center island. He put his hand on the cloth, funneled just a tiny bit of magic into the cloth, and said, "Sun is up, time to wake up." Quinn's face scrunched up as he saw broken words and lines appeared on the cloth. The cold below the stairs in the icy corridor had damaged the map. "Oh, buddy. The cold did a number on you, didn't it?" said Quinn as he checked on the damage within the rune clusters in the layers of the map. After a while, Quinn stood up straight and spread his hand. The next second, various cabinets and cupboards opened up, and numerous vials and tools flew out and set themselves on the table. Quinn put on his gloves and spoke, "Let's fix you up." Scene break. The same night, Quinn walked to the 5th floor corridor with Reckon floating in front of him. He was going to the entrance of the icy corridor. Quinn wanted to see the icy vault once more before starting his research on blood magic. Upon reaching the wall, he funneled magic into the wall, and just like before, the bricks appeared from below the paint and started to shake before giving way to create a square opening. Quinn took a breath and stepped inside, immediately twitching upon coming in contact with the cold. As he walked inside, the walls starting freezing over, and icy-blue ice covered the walls. Finally, Quinn reached the corridor's opening, where the corridor opened up to the extreme cold zone with the vault gate visible just below the short steps. He didn't climb down the steps, not wanting to experience the killing cold. Slowly Quinn's expression turned furious, and he growled in rage as he shot the vilest and damaging magic he knew on the snowflake icicle in front of the vault gate. The rage-fueled magic was the strongest Quinn had ever produced. Fucking vault! "You almost killed me, you frozen piece of shit," yelled the boy who had almost died here before. Quinn kept shooting magic blindly, not even stopping to check if it was working. Gradually, a mist filled the corridor, decreasing the visibility, but Quinn kept shooting spells with accompanying slurs. He only stopped when Quinn felt exhausted from his magic expenditure. Quinn was quite angry at the incident that almost killed him, and even though it was his fault for being careless. But Quinn needed something to blame, and he chose the icy vault to take out his anger. Slowly, the mist lifted, and the gate and snowflake icicle stood unscathed. Not a single scratch could be seen on any surface of ice around the vault. None of Quinn's magic was able to damage the ice. "If I can't break you open, then I would learn how to open you." Quinn pointed at the snowflake icicle and the gate and decreed, "Just you wait, I will get to the thing that you are hiding and make it mine." Then he left without looking back at the vault. This marks the end of Part 9 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.